Hello and welcome to Infrastructure Matters, the podcast dedicated to exploring the dynamic world of infrastructure, asset management and public works. I'm your host, David Jenkins, Chief Executive of IPWA. In today's episode, we're joined by Ursula Bryan, Chief Executive at the Institute of Asset Management, IAM, for a conversation on global trends shaping sustainable infrastructure. Ursula shares valuable insights on inclusive infrastructure, climate resilience, and how technology like digital twins is redefining asset management strategies. We'll explore how IAM is helping professionals worldwide apply practical guidance and foster collaboration to address the challenges of tomorrow. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back and join us for an inspiring conversation with a true leader in the global asset management space. So I'm delighted to have Ursula Bryan, who's the Chief Executive of the Institute of Asset Management. Now, I've just come back from the UK and I was very fortunate to be speaking at Ursula's conference, which was absolutely fantastic. And it was good to meet some of the personalities, people and members within the UK involved in infrastructure asset management. Also, the IAM is celebrating 30 years. And I think we'll make mention of that certainly in the conference when I introduce Ursula tomorrow, who's speaking for us. Now, we've got Ursula to do a podcast, quick chat, and I'm very thankful that she's accepted to do this. So let's get straight into it. So I'm keen to understand just the issues, challenges and opportunities facing the UK with assets. I mean, we're facing similar challenges with decaying infrastructure and funding constraints. Maybe you could give us a bit more of a sort of an overview or a perspective in the UK landscape.
Absolutely, and I'm delighted to be here as well. It's a great honour to be here in your conference, and it was great to host you and the rest of the Global Forum members last week. I think probably one of the biggest areas that is facing the UK is the whole area around sustainable development, and I would say that although you've asked me specifically about the UK, actually this is a global challenge, and I see this across the world with the asset management community and our members. What people are doing is they're really grappling with how do they take all the challenges that sustainability needs to bring, for the world and for their communities, and how can they really think about how to address those. And a lot of organisations are seeing asset management as a route to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that creates a great opportunity for our members to be thinking about how to take asset management and use it to help with sustainability challenges. Cool. I think you asked specifically about infrastructure and funding constraints. And I think, like we've heard this morning from some of the conference speakers, the invited speakers, the infrastructure gap is such an important area for organisations to be really advocating in terms of what there needs to happen for to maintain the assets, to look after the assets for communities, and to really think about how those assets can deliver for the communities, not just now, but into the future. And this is where sustainability ties in with that. And we're seeing things like inclusive infrastructure being such an important part of that approach. So for example, have you got a community? How are they being able to benefit from that infrastructure? And how can you really think about the value that infrastructure provides to maybe communities who might be disadvantaged today through not having access to infrastructure?
And that's a term, we've discussed this, it's not a term that we typically heard in Australia that's happening, but in terms of inclusive infrastructure. So, I guess that's down to social equity, right? And you've just given a broad overview here. It's a terminology that's thrown around quite a bit in the UK.
Yeah, I think it does have different definitions in different countries and also in different sectors. Yeah. So inclusive infrastructure is used by the Global Infrastructure Hub, and they've got a bit of a definition about it, and they've got a bit of a toolkit, and people can look that up and have a look at exactly what it means. In the States, there's a lot of usage of the terminology social equity, which is the term you used, but also social justice, which feels almost taking it to a level where you're thinking really hard about the justice of how your infrastructure is providing services to the community. So it's got lots of different terminology, but it really is about how can you put a value on something that is actually quite hard to put values on.
Yeah, okay. Just go back to the term sustainability, because broad term, financial sustainability, environmental sustainability. When you talk about sustainability of infrastructure, are you putting everything under that umbrella? How are you you heard today around there's been submissions on local government financial sustainability. So it's looking purely at the finances. Local government is struggling to meet the needs of the community, deliver on infrastructure, and obviously maintain and renew. Then you overlap that with an infrastructure net zero and thinking about how we can climate change, et cetera, et cetera. How are you defining it under all those broad terms?
Yeah, I think generally when I talk about sustainable development, I'm sort of looking at the UN sort of definition of sustainable development. I absolutely agree. If you're going to be able to look at how you can tackle this, you need to basically find a way to break it down into smaller things. It was one of the reasons why at the Institute of Asset Management we didn't have sustainable development as one of our knowledge areas. Yeah. We looked at climate change, we're looking at circular economy, we're looking at resilience separately. Yeah. And it's not because they're all separate. There are interrelations between them. But actually, if you try and say we're going to look at sustainable development as a whole, it's such a big topic, and people just get overwhelmed by it. So very much we're thinking, certainly from the Institute of Asset Management's point of view, about the UN definition, but we're really trying to break it down into something that is manageable for us to be able to think about practical guidance for asset managers to be able to take into their organisations and to be able to use to make a difference.
Yeah. We probably should have started with this because IAM is based in the UK, but you've got chapters all around the world, and you've got a membership of 2,200. And what's predominantly the makeup of the membership?
So we've got a mixture of asset owners and people who are providing services to asset owning organisations. So that ranges right from people who are actually managing assets for other people through contracts, right through to consultancy services. Predominantly, we have a lot of very large asset owning organisations, so people who own sort of water assets, or they're managing transport assets or energy assets. But we increasingly have people who are involved in areas such as social housing, education, defence, and certainly in a number of our chapters. So, for example, in the US and in Canada, our a lot of the members are municipal, because actually the asset ownership is organised that way. So it depends a little bit how the asset ownership has been almost carved up in the country about who the members are. But we have a mixture, and I think it's an important symbiotic relationship to have both the people who are grappling with the issues of being an owner with people who can potentially help them to achieve some of the desired outcomes they want to try and achieve for their communities.
And you mentioned this right at the start. We are both on the Global Forum for Maintenance and Asset Management. The landscape document's gone out. You have spent time integrating that into your guidance material. We've done the same thing, obviously changing the ISO standards. And I know that our members use some of your guidance material, particularly the anatomy document, isn't it? That's equivalent, that's sort of similar to, that's a practical, that's the how, right? So we'd have the IIM, you have the anatomy. That really goes into the how and sort of the practical guidance of how you translate. Is that correct?
Yeah, we often think of the ISO documents and the landscape document, the Global Forum landscape document, as a what document. They sort of define either the requirements in, say, ISO 55001, or in the case of the landscape, they define the what as in terms of the subjects that, the sort of that make up the discipline of asset management, the sort of breadth and depth of it. We've got as you say, the IAM anatomy we've had for a number of years now, and we're on our 4th version of it now. And that document takes those subjects and starts to break them down into, it's a beginning of a how. It's designed to be an entry document, so that the first part of the document talks about asset management, it talks about why you would do it, benefits, and a number of things that are pertinent to if you're really thinking about asset management within your organisation. Then we have a set of subject-specific guidance documents that we develop that sit below that get into more depth. And that's where you can get into sort of case studies and the things that really help people with the sort of practical guides and what would be your top 10 starting position, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Just changing the subject a little bit. So in terms of new technologies, so we've talked a little bit about this, particularly at some of the literature, just around driving efficiency. So asset registers, collecting asset data, can you use technology to drive efficiency, right? And now I would imagine in a market the size of the UK, plus also, as you've already said, the makeup of your membership, some consultancies as well as the asset owners, are you finding that new technologies is that a big thing at the moment that's in the UK European market?
So I think it is a big thing. I mean, we've got a group in the Institute of Asset Management looking at digital transformation. Yeah. And what we often see is the organisations we're engaged and involved with are very much on a digital transformation journey of one description or another. Yeah. We've had quite a take-up of digital twins and people using that digital twinning technology. And in fact, the UK actually worked on developing a whole UK-wide digital twin, which is a huge ambition to do, but hugely beneficial if you can achieve it, which is about integrating those digital twins. But we're seeing a lot of organisations use a combination of digital twins. They're using automation when they can. There's quite a lot of inspection and activity is now being done automated as much as possible. And so we're seeing a lot of those types of technologies integrated in these digital transformation journeys, very much focused on what is the outcome you want to achieve. Because often just having, say, a drone collecting information isn't going to achieve that outcome in its own right. It's then what you do with it, how do you integrate it with, say, other technologies such as LiDAR, 3D technology to be able to really benefit an outcome.
Just on that outcomes, and we were in a session just now with John Hardwick from Transport New South Wales, and he's sort of saying you've got to reframe things around outcomes based. Let's not talk about assets. Let's talk about what are the outcomes that we're trying to provide. Does that resonate?
Absolutely. We've had and continue to have a long-term campaign to help people understand the benefits of thinking from an outcomes point of view. We did some work with a television network, so the independent television network in the UK. And we did a series of programs with them. The first was planning for the long term, which was really thinking about, don't just think short term, make sure that you're thinking much longer term. The second was why outcomes matter, which is absolutely about thinking about why the assets are there, what are they achieving for the people who are using them, not let's focus on the asset itself, because the asset is only there for that, serving that, to achieve that final outcome. And then the third program we did was about unlocking value. So how do you go about practical things you can do that would enable you to unlock value? And an example of that is that type of thing I spoke about with digital transformation. That's a clear example. It's not the only one. We see a lot of organisations implement prioritisation type tools to be able to take account of lots of different type of not just capital investments, but a combination of maintenance and renewal type investments with sort of the bigger capital investments, and try and understand what those how they prioritise to achieve an overall objective. Yeah,
okay. And look, I'm keeping our listeners on the toes here because we're flying around with different topics, but bringing it back now to sort of the whole issue around sustainability and delving a bit deeper into specifically green infrastructure and natural assets. And you were fortunate enough to have me, and I talked around at your conference just how you can value green infrastructure using a traditional asset management approach. Is the whole area of green infrastructure, natural assets, and that sort of way of thinking? Because some would argue, well, why do we have to talk about it as a separate thing? But we are. And Canada, I think, is leading the way, and you've got a chapter there and doing some really interesting stuff in this space. Is this a big thing? Is this a big topic that you're noticing amongst your membership in the UK?
I think very much so. I think people are grappling with it. I think they're trying to understand how do they consider grey assets and green assets in tandem, and what do you actually do practically to do it. But I think it is really important because we know that green assets have a huge amount of advantages in terms of they'll renew themselves in some respect.
Yeah.
And although you do need to make sure you're managing them, the managing of those assets is a completely different skill set from managing, say, grey assets where you're worried about how the concrete's deteriorating or how things are rusting.
Yeah.
So I think green assets is super important. We did a knowledge piece through our climate emergency group earlier on in the year, which talked about natural assets and had a few case studies in there to try and help people start to think about, well, how do they really integrate this within what they're doing? As you said, we've got a number of our members in Canada and other places in the world who are doing some really interesting things in this space. And I think our ability to be able to contribute to that is really important. It's an important part of our role as an institute, and I'm delighted that we can we're talking about how we can best support each other with getting information out there for our members and the wider community to be able to really think about this. I think there are potentially other people, and I think you've mentioned a whole raft of different organisations who actually really think about this, but they don't think about it the way we think about it, because they don't approach it from our sort of asset management mindset or managing assets mindset. They're approaching it in a very different way, and I think being able to integrate with those individuals and think about how do we best bring about a joint outcome is a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm glad you raised that, because we're finding, and again, this is more of a local government perspective, but the arborists, the landscape architects, typically, I mean, they won't manage assets, right? But they are typically, local government typically can be quite siloed. But I think this is an opportunity to bring those professions together. We're trying to get the same outcome, right? And so do you also see that as an opportunity? Do you engage with sort of those different types of bodies in the UK? Because there would be, right?
Not today, as much as I think you have done. I think you are leading the way there in terms of your engagement. But we do have people in other parts of our wider community who have engaged with and do engage with some of these organisations. And I think the other opportunity we see as well, and I think this is very prevalent in Australia and New Zealand, is we see First Nations who absolutely know all this important information and have known it for centuries about how to manage assets. And so we often see the First Nations who are doing really exciting things in this space. They don't actually think it's particularly novel or new, because they absolutely understand how natural assets and green assets can absolutely benefit their communities.
Yeah, okay. Now, here in Canberra, sunny Canberra, well, it's warmer than it is in the UK, that's for sure. But we've just had the opening sessions. You've heard our Minister of Infrastructure speak. We had a panel session. You'll may have looked at the program. What are you sort of looking to get out of the whole conference over the next 2 days? What is it?
So I was really excited to be here in such a broad community of people focused in the municipal environment, because whilst I do get that opportunity, normally that's interspersed with lots of other people, so I don't get that sort of real laser focus in that area. I think it's a really great opportunity to see and hear how people are considering outcomes. From the speakers this morning, everyone spoke about outcomes and how they can achieve that, but in just lots of different ways with lots of different sort of focus. And so from my point of view, we very much try and get this message out there. Think of outcomes, don't think of the assets. Think of the outcomes you're trying to achieve. To hear different perspectives, to hear different people approaching it from a completely different lens is just super insightful from my point of view, because it then helps me with going back to my members and going, well, actually, I've heard members of the IPWA Congress talking about this in a completely different way. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, okay, that's good. And your background is, it's different to mine. You have credibility for once, because you were an asset owner and you worked at the National Grid, which is pretty sizable utility organisation in the UK. So having come from that, being in the profession, and then looking after members who are in the profession, that would give you a unique insight, right? So exactly to what they want and demand and need and expect.
It is a huge privilege to be in this job. And I tell people I have the best job in the world, because I spend my day speaking to volunteers or interacting with people who are really passionate and engaged about what about the discipline, about what they want to achieve. And my perspective, coming from an asset owning organisation, is, of course, I'll always champion the asset owner. I feel that that's a really important part of my role. And I absolutely, having worked with a lot of service providers over the year in all sorts of those different guises I spoke about, it gives me an opportunity to reflect with them and the asset owners about the types of things that are important to them, and I can share a little bit of my experience with them as well when I'm having conversations. So it gives me a great opportunity. But that period I spent in National Grid really set me up in terms of just created a massive opportunity for me. I started at National Grid, asset management wasn't even really a thing, and so I was very fortunate to be engaged with the first asset management organisation that they created, and I sort of grew with the discipline in terms of my own journey. So it's been a massive opportunity.
And we're both in the business of knowledge management. We've discussed that, guidance material, helping asset owners, and also in the business of education, right? And so there's a shared goal there around building capacity and capability, right? And you just said asset management wasn't even a profession sort of 15, 20 years ago. But and I talk about it in terms of a profession. Some talk about an industry. I talk about it in terms of a profession. And you might have heard or picked up on some of the nuances here in the conference that, there is an issue around building capacity and capability within local government, particularly in remote, rural, regional areas within infrastructure asset management. What's the landscape in the UK facing similar issues, and some of your views on that?
Yeah, so I think everywhere that we have members that I interact with, they all have challenges about skills and capabilities. And everyone wants to be able to build those skills and capabilities. So the skill shortage is a real issue. A lot of the organisations that I interact with have actually done things internally to be able to create their asset management capability. So they've created academies, or they've created specific asset management routes through their training programs that they advocate within their own organisations. We're very fortunate. We developed a couple of qualifications in the Institute, our certificate and diploma, and a number of those organisations actually utilise some of those as part of a much wider, broader set of activities they do. One of the things that I've really has brought home to me with doing the role is how important volunteering plays in people's development. We have an increasing amount of opportunities within the Institute to get people engaged in volunteering. And when I hear back from people who are volunteering and why they're volunteering, they're giving up their own time. They've got busy lives and busy jobs. And they're giving up their own time. They're doing it because they're getting something out of it. Yeah. It's not just we're producing some joint knowledge. Yeah. They're building a community, they're learning from others. But their experience very much mirrors my own. I was a volunteer from very early in the Institute days, And the amount I learned, which fed into my asset management career, is immense. I couldn't really put it on paper how much that I gained that knowledge and experience from other people, and learnt from them and heard them speak about things, and then thought, oh, okay, I can go back and think about that in a different way. And I see that with our volunteers as well. So I think the sort of the education, that helping people understand, is really important, but also giving people the opportunity to apply that knowledge, with it, be it within their own company or through a different mechanism, is massively, it's a massive opportunity as well.
And building on, and this is all related to getting young people interested and excited in infrastructure asset management and a career. You've done some interesting stuff, and you are quite focused on it. What have you done specifically in that area?
So we've got a next-gen community, and next-gen in the Institute is somebody who's new to asset management. So you don't necessarily have to be a young person, although naturally we do have a number of people in that space. We do have some people who take a bit of a different direction in their career and maybe come to asset management a bit later on in their career. So we have a next-gen community. We've set up next-gen leads in the various chapters, or rather the chapters have. It's not something we do in the centre. It's very much led from the chapters. And they are very much thinking about what works in their geography from a cultural point of view to help foster next-gen community. You witnessed one of the things that happens in one of our chapters when you attended that conference in London last week, where we open up opportunities for next-gen to put in a submission to do what is in effect an electronic poster. It's just a single slide, and they present for 3 minutes, and then they get 3 minutes of questions. It's a brilliant opportunity for our next-gen community to come along and present to a large group of people at a conference in an environment that's very safe. You were in the audience. You will have witnessed everyone's there really encouraging people to not only attend the talk, but actually think about really relevant questions to help people. It's just one example. What we find is people are drawn to our profession often because we know that people are very drawn to roles that have a strong purpose. And a lot of the activities that they'll get involved with in our profession is absolutely speaking to that strong purpose. You know, providing those essential services to people, being able to help and support and tackle climate change, or think about how you can really create a sustainable future. Those are things that really resonate with people coming into the workforce, or maybe changing career to think about that. And so when I speak to our next-gen community, that is really one of the key things that I hear back from them, which is why they're really focused. And so finding a way to support our next-gen community in fostering that strong sense of purpose is really important. It's, for example, a reason why we've got quite a lot of the next-gen community involved in our climate change work, because they're very passionate about it, and they want to be able to further that area. That's
brilliant. It's really good. And the conference, I thought what you did with the next gen and the poster presentations, it sounds simple. I thought it was brilliant. Great concept. Just to sort of round it all off, and sort of this is related. We've built a pretty good relationship over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. How do you think IAM and IPWA can sort of work together in the future?
So I'm really excited about the opportunity to build the relationship. It started a little bit before you joined the Global Forum, and I think it's growing from strength to strength with you being involved in the Global Forum as well. I think we have some very clear areas where we have a common interest from our membership. That the whole area of sustainability, green infrastructure, natural assets, that's obviously an area, and we've spoken about how we can work together. I've agreed we'll go out there and try and get some case studies from some of our members and think about how we can best share those and for the joint benefit of our membership. The other area that we've started to speak about really since last week has been in the whole area of inclusive infrastructure. And I think, that's an area of interest, and it's an area of interest for our members. We've seen interest, particularly in the UK and Canada, in that space, but there are other areas where we've seen that, so in the US and other places. And I think we will see that as a growing area of interest. So that's a great opportunity. And I think we will always have that opportunity whilst we're Global Forum members to be working on joint projects as well. And I think being able to bring our community, which have, sometimes a different focus or a different geographical view, but bringing that together is a huge strength of being engaged in that Global Forum community and figuring out a way to generate material that is useful to our membership and is useful to us to be able to take into account in our knowledge resources such as the landscape.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think also personally we share a common philosophy here around, there's ways and means in which we can solve some of these bigger ticket items and we can work together, which is only going to benefit the profession globally. And where we can do that, why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah.
Look, Ursula, I'm delighted that you're here. Thank you ever so much for the invite in London. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And I am genuinely looking forward to how we can build a relationship with IAM further into the future. So for our listeners out there, keep note. You'll see some further things coming, particularly in that green infrastructure practice note. But I'm just delighted that you can be here and you've made the long journey to be in Canberra. And I really, really do hope you enjoy the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
And that wraps up another episode of Infrastructure Matters. A huge thank you to our special guest, Ursula Bryan, for joining us and offering her valuable global perspective on sustainable infrastructure, digital transformation, and the future of asset management. To our listeners, as always, thank you for tuning in. We hope this discussion has sparked ideas and strategies you can take back to your own communities and organisations. Be sure to follow us for future episodes as we continue to explore the innovations and challenges transforming public works. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review Infrastructure Matters on your favourite platform. Follow us on LinkedIn for more updates and exclusive content. I'm David Jenkins, signing off, reminding you that in the realm of infrastructure, every detail matters.